Hi everybody and welcome back to Crafted by Corie. If you are returning, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Y'all mean the world to me. And if you're new, welcome. I'm Corie. I hope that you'll consider subscribing and hitting that like button because it really does help my channel to get noticed and to grow. I have a fantastic compilation video for you today. It is my favorite 21 projects from 2021. So let's go ahead and get right on into the crafting.
DIY number 1. For this project, I have ordered these wood trays from Amazon. It was a pack of 5. I think it was like $25, and I thought it was a really good price. And then I have a couple of handles from Dollar Tree plungers, which you can see I cut down with my little miter box. I basically cut the screwy ends off of them and then cut them in half. Now I'm just gonna sand them down on the edges, just make sure everything is nice and clean. And I'm taking a look at these, and I guess I was trying to make sure that they were the same length, but I'm showing you now that I screwed holes in the bottoms of them. So I did larger holes at one end on 2 of them where I can actually fit my screw head down inside of it. So that's that end. And then the other end, I screwed a regular, or I drilled, I should say, a regular size hole that my screw will be able to screw into. And I did that at the bottom of all 3. So 2 large holes in 2 of the things, and then 3 regular, holes that I drilled. Hopefully it'll make sense a little bit later as I put it together. But right now I have found the center of my 3 trays that I am using from that pack, and I'm just drilling a hole the same size as what I need for my screw. And I basically had taken a piece of paper and made a template, like I traced my circles onto it, folded the circles in half and then in half again to find center. So it was just an easy way for me to find center on these. I didn't show how I did that, but hopefully you understand what I mean. So I'm going to take my Gorilla wood glue, and I've got that large hole there that my screw head fits into. I'm going to put some wood glue down inside of here. So I'm going to drop my screw back down inside there, and then I am going to fill it the rest of the way with wood glue. And I'm trying to be real careful not to get it on the threads of the screw, because I'm going to want to be able to screw my pieces together later, and so I don't want the glue jamming that up. And here I'm just checking to make sure that the screw is standing upright and not leaning to any one side, because I want to make sure that everything screws together straight. So hopefully as I go here you'll understand what I'm trying to do. Essentially, I wanted to have a way to screw all of these pieces together without it being visible. So this was my makeshift way of having a screw connecting 2 different pieces of the wood pull together. Hopefully that makes sense. So now I've decided that I am going to do a buffalo check paint on my trays. I could not find my masking tape to save my life. I don't know where it is. It is somewhere in my craft room. I can't find it. So I'm using Scotch tape. So I apologize because it makes it a little bit difficult for you to see. It was a little challenging for me to see even as I was doing it, but I made it work. I'm all about find a way or make a way. So I was using my Scotch tape, but I'm just using the same method that I'm sure you've seen a lot of other people use. I'm using a length of the tape to measure off in between the tape sections that I'm going to protect from paint. Again, I'm having a lot of trouble explaining what I'm talking about tonight, apparently, but hopefully you are understanding what I'm saying, especially with the visual. So, and I'm sure, again, that you've seen other people do this. So once I had that all taped off, and I promise I'm going to move on in just a second here. There we go. So once I had it all taped off, I came in with my Adirondack white chalk paint by Home Decor, and I am just going to give this all a good coat, and I'm being careful to get as close as I can to the edges without hitting the edges, because I wanted to keep the sides of the tray the wood tone. So then I came back in with a smaller brush and just made sure that I was able to get in at all of those edges, and I was just real careful. I did not tape up the edges. So, but here we go, revealing this first set of lines, and it came out so nice and crisp. This is so satisfying. So very happy with this. So once I had all of that peeled away and it was all dry, I came back in and I did my tape the same way, but in the opposite direction. And you can see my square sitting there to my right, and I had used that to just help make sure that I was getting my tape lined up nice and square and perpendicular to the lines that were already there, because I want these to look like squares, like checks, not like diamonds. And if you're off, if you've got it at an angle, they're going to look more like diamond shapes rather than squares. So now I'm coming in with my crystal. It's crystal or crystalline? I can't remember, but it's a chalk paint as well. I believe this one is also by Home Decor, which is a Plaid product. So Home Decor and Waverly, they are both made by Plaid. I didn't even realize that until recently, but they are both Plaid products. They're just different brands within the Plaid family. So at any rate, I was using, I believe it's crystalline. But anyway, really pretty color. And then I came in with my Nantucket blue. And for my Nantucket blue, this is just being very, very careful to hand paint the squares on. So I still do have that tape down, which protected the white everywhere where I needed the white protected. And then I wasn't as careful with the crystalline because I knew that where it was hitting the white, I was going to be coming back in with this Nantucket blue. So hopefully that makes sense. So it's here with the Nantucket blue that I'm having to be real careful. So I have a nice small, flat, relatively stiff brush that I am using to do that. And again, at my little edges along the sides of the tray, I'm coming in with a tiny, tiny brush. So here we go. You ready? I was so excited when I started pulling this tape up. Look at how awesome this is, you guys. And I'm not one to really toot my own horn, but I can't tell you how proud I am of this particular project. This tray may be my favorite project that I have done since I started my YouTube channel. It's between this and my ship wheel. I don't know if I can beat the ship wheel. The ship wheel was really pretty up there for me, but this tray, I just love it. So this is them all done. And you can see that they do nest. So they are slightly different sizes. When it's all put together, it's hard to tell that the top one is smaller than the bottom one, but you can see here that they actually are. So I'm starting to screw in my first screw. So this is the third screw. So you need 3 screws and 3 of these wood poles or whatever you want to call them. So I screwed my screw into the bottom, and I'm screwing that into one of my wood lengths that has one of the other screws sticking out of it. And I did let that set overnight with the wood glue so that that screw is not coming out of the top of that pole, for lack of a better term. So now I just went into my stash and I grabbed out 5 little wood beads, and I wanted to have feet on this just to lift it up a little bit, and also so that little screw in the middle wasn't going to interfere with anything, because I do not have it countersunk, if you will. So I just used some wood glue on that, and of course I didn't wait for that to dry, so I recommend you wait for it to dry before you move on. I ended up having to put them back on again in a couple of places, but because I was moving this around and I was knocking them over anyway. Do as I say, not as I do, right? So now I am just screwing together the next section. So I had set the next tray on top of that screw. I used my second length of the pole, if you will, and now I'm screwing on, as you can see, the third tray. So you can just see how I just set it right down on the screw, turned it until it was on there. And now I'm ready to take this, but then I realized I really want to do something with the top of my, what do you even call this, you guys? Pole? Post? Stick? I don't know. So I am taking from the Dollar Tree one of these shower curtain rings, and I am going to find a drill bit that matches the little knobby thing at the end that like hooks into the other part of the ring to like close the ring. I don't know if I don't know if I'm making any sense, but hopefully you'll, again, understand what I'm saying as I go here. So I'm drilling a hole through the top of my top stick, right? And so I'm finding that that little knobby thing goes right into the hole, and it's perfect, and it's holding the one side in place, but there isn't anything to hold it in place on the other side. So I am going to remove that little knobby thing from another one of these rings. So I scored it, and now I'm just using my needle nose pliers, and I broke it off. So I'm taking that and I'm tucking it in where the other one would normally latch it. So is this making sense? I hope this is making sense. And I'm just going to hot glue that in place. So now I have a little knobby thing on both sides of the ring that they can now fit into my stick, right? Are you getting what I'm trying to explain? Because I know I'm not making a lot of sense. But at any rate, I decided I wanted it painted. Magically, it is now that Nantucket blue color. And now I'm going to just go ahead and screw that onto the top of my tray. And there you go. I love this so, so much. Please let me know what you think in the comments. DIY number 2. This is my inspiration picture. It was something that I saw on Pinterest. I thought it was really pretty. So I have these slices of wood from a tree that we cut down. My brother had sliced them up for me. And then this is a leftover Dollar Tree wreath form that I'd already pulled out the middle ring from. I tried to pull it apart and it was pretty solid, so I ended up just having to clip out all of those little connectors. So I'm just trying to figure out how it's going to sit on there, and I used a chenille stem and just wrapped that around and around. I used a dark green because I figured that would blend in with my greenery. So once I had all 3 rings set, I went ahead and grabbed these garland ties from the Dollar Tree. I believe they come in a set of 10, it might be 12. And I bent them in half, as you saw, and I just started wrapping them around the rings, the hoops. So at the base, I was doing it around all 3 hoops, and I just kept kind of tying them on there and setting it up to see how it was looking and try to gauge trying to gauge how many of these I needed to have on there. And as I started working my way up and around the hoops, I went from wrapping them around all 3 hoops to wrapping them around just the 2 hoops, and then eventually just around that outer hoop. And I just kept working it until I made it about halfway around, a little more than halfway around the hoop as far as where the branches landed. So I just kept checking my inspiration picture and kind of kept going until I had it about where I wanted it there. So fluffed it all up a little bit, and then I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to anchor it. So I did use my staple gun, and those were, I think they're 1/2-inch staples. They are whatever the longest staple is that you can get for these little staple guns. So I did that, and then I used a generous amount of hot glue just so that it could get down in there and make its way into the wood as well. So now I am taking fairy lights, and I had shared these with you a few videos back, I think, but I do have them in my Amazon store, and there's a link in my description box for these if you have interest. So the link is to my Amazon storefront, and these are in the storefront. So I just wrapped them around and around on each of the hoops, and I did turn them on just so I could see where they were and how I was positioning them, and I thought it it also might make it a little bit easier for you to see what I was doing. Once I got up to the top, I did kind of jump from that top hoop into the middle hoop, but in a place where the greenery would camouflage that. And then I worked my way back down. Once I ran out of length, I ended up using 2 sets of the fairy lights. These are wire basically. So as I'm wrapping them, they are kind of staying put, right? So it's like little lights on wire. I don't know how else to describe it, but when I ran out of the one, I just secured it down by wrapping it around and it stayed put. And then I started with a new strand. So worked my way all the way back down. So I've got it around all 3 hoops, and then I tucked it under the greenery. And I did not glue down those little on-off switches, by the way, because I want to be able to access them and replace the batteries if and when needed. Excuse me. So now I'm ripping apart one of my little picks. As you know, I'm always pulling these things apart and putting some little poinsettias in here. There's a pine cone, some berries, and you can decorate these however you want. I'm going to be adding some of those little Dollar Tree bulbs. These are all Dollar Tree materials except for the fairy lights and that wood slab that's from my backyard. So I'm just positioning everything where it makes my heart happy. So gluing down the bulbs, and then I'm going to drop a little red one in there as well. And that's it, you guys. I love this, and I hope you like it too. DIY number 3. So this is my inspiration picture for my next project. It's inspiration only, it's not going to be exact, but I've got a couple of these fun frames from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to be using one of these wood pieces from the wood pile from the Hobby Lobby. I think there were 6 in that pack, and I want to say it was like $2.99. So I am prepping my frames. I'm pulling all of the little tabs out. And then I'm going to seal the glass into the frames using my Star Bond glue and accelerator. And so you just use a little dab. They say like a little dot every inch is all that you need. And this stuff really worked well, especially with the accelerator. I was impressed. Of course, I should have taken the cap off of the accelerator first. Find a way or make a way. But I sprayed that on the other surface, set down my glass, and then just made sure that it was where it needed to be. And yeah, that was good to go. So I did the same thing on the other side. And now I'm going to be taking my little wood piece, and this has curved edges on it, and I want the edges to be square. So I am just slicing off the ends so that I have square edges. And the reason for that, and then I went ahead obviously and cleaned it up with my sanding block, but the reason for that is I'm tucking it into these frames, and I want it to sit as flush and square as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and use my Star Bond crazy glue again, use my accelerator, got that set in there. And then did you see how quick that set up, you guys? It's like in there. So I'm adding some to the other end, and I'm going to use my accelerator on the other side and attach that as well. Once I had that all set, I'm going to grab a bunch of the large popsicle sticks, large craft sticks, if you will, and I'm going to go ahead and create a roof with these. So using my crazy glue again, I'm applying the accelerator to the opposite piece. So wherever you put the glue, that's not where you want to put the accelerator. So you spray the accelerator on the thing that you're attaching it to, if that makes sense. So the glue goes on one part that you're connecting, and then the accelerator goes on the other part you're connecting, and then when you put them together, it just creates that bond almost instantly. So as I go up the little roof, I'm overlapping my craft sticks to make it look a little bit like shingles. So I did the one side and then I came back in and I did the other side. And I was applying glue to the edge where I knew it was going to connect with the frame. So now I'm coming in and I'm taping the glass. And I'm doing it this way because I just want to make sure I don't get paint on it. I could have painted it beforehand, but I figured I wanted to paint the entire thing. So I just went ahead and taped off the glass and did it all at once. This is my Elephant Chalk Paint by Waverly, and I'm giving the entire lantern one good coat of elephant. That was really all it needed. It didn't need more than a single coat. So it worked out real well. So now I have these shower curtain rings from the Dollar Tree, and then these picks that I'd picked up. They were $1.49 at the Hobby Lobby, and I've had them in my stash for a few years. I'm sure I got them on sale, so they were probably 40% off. So $1.50 for these plus 40% off. Speaking my language. So I trimmed off the ends of these, and I am just going to situate them at the top of the roof and use some hot glue to secure those on either side. And then I'm going to go ahead and take one of the shower curtain rings and I'm going to give that a coat of the Elephant Chalk Paint as well. And as I was doing this, I felt like it was looking a little bit flat. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to get out my brushed metal folk art chalk paint. So I went ahead and grabbed that, and I'm using a little bit of a dry brush technique on the shower curtain ring. And so just giving it a little bit more interest. Now, once that's all dry, I'm going to tuck it in between my little floral picks and secure that down with hot glue as well. And that's just going to create the top of our lantern there. So once that was all good to go, I decided to come back in with some more of that brushed metal paint. And it's basically a gold tone. It's called brushed metal for whatever reason, but it's just a really pretty metallic gold. And I really like it a lot, actually. So I am just, again, very lightly streaking that on to add some detail and some dimension to the project. Hopefully that makes sense. And that was pretty much it, you guys. I am loving this too. I hope you love it as much as I do. DIY number 4. So for this project, I found these adorable little shoe things, booties at the Dollar Tree. They're nice and stiff. And then I've got this Dollar Tree hat that I'm going to take apart. I was actually impressed with how well it was made. It was lined with fleece. So I got all of that out, undid the seams, and then I basically had this tube of knit material. And so I'm just trying to figure out how I want to use it. And I ended up cutting it about in half, and I'm going to use the one part for the body. And at first I figured I would just seal it up like a tube. I did end up, after I sealed this, wanting to go back and kind of adjust the shape of it a little bit. You do want to make sure that you're using your finger protectors for the hot glue because, yeah. So that part where it had the notch in the top, I went ahead and cut that in half, and then the one half I cut in half again. I'm going to make the little arms and mittens. Now, when I cut this, I was thinking, I needed a notch for the little thumb area. If I had it to do again, I would just make a slit, because when you use the hot glue on it, it's going to make that notch more pronounced, and it almost ended up looking a little bit more like a claw than a mitten. But you can learn from my mistakes. So I'm now turning this other body piece, if you will, inside out, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm kind of working, as things dry, I flip other things inside out, or not dry, but cool, you know what I mean? But here I am trimming it again, because I decided that, and this is the end that I had glued, I didn't like the shape of it, so I'm just going to glue the parts that I just kind of cut and get that sealed back up again. So then I'm going to fold it in half, and I decided I was going to cut the other end as well. So just making it more of a round shape. So that last piece that I had left, I'm going to glue that to create his hat. So hopefully this is all making sense. I think it's going to make a little bit more sense as I am putting our little friend together here, but sealing everything up with the hot glue and then flipping it right side out so that I have my seams. So here I'm using some Dollar Tree little glass gems for the bottom, and this is just going to help stand our little guy up. At first, I thought I might have the legs coming out from his sitting position. Ultimately, I did have him standing, but that was why I went ahead and put the glass beads in here to begin with. If you are going to make him stand up, you probably don't need the glass beads in this section, but that's what I did. And then I was just kind of helping the shape a little bit more as I was stuffing it. So once I had it all stuffed, I went ahead and grabbed a rubber band, and I'm using that to secure the top there. And then once I had that all nice and secure, I'm gonna kind of check and make sure that his little hat is gonna fit here. So I'm flipping the hat right side out. And you know what, if you have a sewing machine and you'd like to use your sewing machine for these projects, you absolutely can. I'm still working on getting the tension fixed on my sewing machine, and so I'm using the hot glue. But then I'm gonna go ahead and stuff his little mittens and his arms. And then I had sealed up the little end there, and I'm going to attach it with a generous amount of hot glue to the top of his shoulder, so to speak. So I did that on both sides, sealed that up, and then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm also going to seal it with some generous amounts of hot glue to the side of our little friend here. So then I'm going to stuff his little hat, and just going to make sure that it looks like it's going to fit on there. I did add some more stuffing to it, and then I want to make sure that I'm doing his beard. So I was struggling with that a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that it was nice and full. So I'm using one of these Dollar Tree dust mop things, and every time I cut one of these, I find that it tends to fray super easily. So I decided I was going to try something. I'm basically kind of pulling all of the little strands apart. I'm creating not a hem, a part. There we go. I'm going to use my hot glue here, and I'm going to just try to see if creating a line of hot glue, I'm going to do a double line, and then I'm going to cut down kind of in between my lines of hot glue. I'm hoping that this is going to keep this dust cloth from fraying. While I'm waiting for the hot glue to cool, I'm using one of my Arteza markers on a ping pong ball. It's like a flesh tone, creating a nose. So now I'm coming back, and I am struggling a little bit with the hot glue, but I am cutting through it, trying to go down between the two lines I made. It pulled away a little bit of the strands here, but after that, it really was, it worked. So highly recommend doing that if you are trying to work with this stuff and want to keep it from fraying. So I secured it to my little, I'm going to call him a gnome, and then I'm going to put his hat on. And I'm going to work from the back forward. So I'm flipped up the end of his hat, and I'm not worried about the frayed edge because I'm going to be doing something in a little bit to finish that off and make it look nice and finished. So don't worry about the frayed edge there. But I'm working my way around with the hot glue and just getting it up underneath his little cap to make sure it's secured to his head. And then as I get around to the front, I'm going to go ahead and tuck in his nose and make sure that that's all nice and secured as well. And you just want to be careful with the hot glue with the ping pong ball because it will pop the ball. So just don't want to be pressing too hard on it because it'll just crush the ball, and you won't really have a round nose anymore. So now I'm taking these little white pom-poms because I didn't really have anything else in my stash for this. You could use probably cotton. You might even be able to use something like batting. I'm not sure. I had these little white pom-poms, so that is what I am using to trim out his little hat. Again, just be real careful with the hot glue. So I found for me personally, if I put a little bit of hot glue on each little ball, I was able to position it the way that I wanted. But again, just be careful because I did end up burning myself. I probably should have used my finger protectors. But when I was placing one of these little balls down, I kind of wasn't paying enough attention to where I'd placed the hot glue, and I got my finger in it. So once I had it around his little hat, I went in and I did a round around his wrists to create little cuffs or for his sleeves. And I am going to go in later and do another round, but for right now I decided I want to put his little shoes on. So I'm using more of these glass beads. I just wanted to help make it bottom heavy. And I'm positioning him on here, and he's standing up on this without any problem. So I'm going to come in and I'm giving copious amounts of hot glue, just being real generous with the hot glue. And I'm going to set him right down on top of there and let that hot glue cool. I'm just kind of messing with his shape again. So now I have this black felt, and it's adhesive felt that I'd gotten from Arteza. I'm cutting 2 strips because it wasn't quite long enough to go around his middle. I'm making him a belt. So you can see I've got him laying face down right now. I'm going to wrap the belt around. I had it start in the middle of his back, and then I'm going to trim it off in the front. Sorry, it's kind of hard to see there. And then I'm going to line up the other piece at the back. So butted those right up against each other. I'm going to do the same thing at the front, butting them up against each other. And I've got these cute little snowflake stickers, and I made one his little belt buckle. And then I decided I wanted to fancy up his little hat with some of these snowflakes as well. So just adding snowflakes in whichever way was making my heart happy, just kind of random. And here he is, our little Santa friend. I love him. Let me know what you think. DIY number 5. So this is my inspiration project. It is from Crackled, and they wanted $44.99 for it. I am starting with this old leg from a table that had broken, and I'm just going to use my miter saw and cut through it right between those 2 little bumps on the leg. And this is hardwood, so it did take me a while, but I finally managed to get through it, and then I just sanded that off. So now I have a wood round from Hobby Lobby. It came in a pack of 3. I'm going to use my Gorilla Glue and just get this adhered, but then I'm going to come back in with some reinforcement in a minute, just figuring out where I want to place it here. So you saw that little pumpkin, that'll be part of the project. And so just wanted to kind of see where that's going to sit. So go on ahead and getting that glued down, and I'm going to set that aside to dry for a little bit. And now I have, I guess this is maybe a candy dish from the Dollar Tree, and I am going to paint just the base of it. I'm going to paint all the way around there, and then I'll also paint the bottom because I don't want any light kind of coming through the bottom of our lantern, or it might seem a little strange. So I'm going to paint that, and then I'm also going to paint the lid. I'm not sure why I felt it necessary to show you so much of this part, but we're almost done. So painting the bottom of it here, and then I'm going to move on to the lid, and I painted the whole lid, top and underneath, so both sides, just to give extra coverage. So set that aside, and now I'm coming in with my reinforcements for my little lamppost. So I've just got some nails here. I'm banging in through to the bottom into the post. And you could totally use screws. It probably would be a little bit more secure if you were to do that, but I've just had these nails handy, and so I am nailing these on into my project. So once that's done, I'm going to give my little lamppost a coat of black chalk paint, and just making sure that I get it all the way around the base down there. And I wasn't too worried about getting a little bit on the round, but I didn't want to paint the whole round because I'm coming in with my fern to paint the round. And the really cool thing about this project, and now I'm starting to create my little wreath, so I'll come back to that in a second. But I love this project because I can totally switch out the decor from season to season. So it's going to be a lot of fun to recreate it for the holidays this Christmas or this winter season. So I have a piece left over from a floral pick here that you see I've kind of bent around to create a circular shape, and I'm using my floral wire and just securing that. I'm just going around and around, and then I'm going to be taking my floral picks. Now I started with these smaller flowers thinking that I might be able to make it work. So I started to pull them off. Now there's no wire in here, and there's no real way for me to adhere the leaves, so I eventually gave up on that. It just wasn't going to do what I wanted it to. So now I have, I believe this is called Aster. This is also from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just sliding up the leaves on it and cutting off the little stems. And I kind of bent it like an L shape so that the stem would lay against the little hoop that I created, and then the flower would stand upright away from the hoop. So hopefully that makes sense the way that I'm trying to describe it, because I didn't want the flowers to kind of lay flat against the hoop. I wanted them to be perky and facing you when you're looking at this little wreath that we're creating. And I'm actually really happy with these flowers. I think they look super fall-like, and they remind me a little bit of sunflowers. I know that they're not sunflowers, but that's what they kind of make me think of a little bit. And I just thought that they were really sweet. So I am just wrapping them around the wreath. So using my floral wire, gonna wrap each of those stems about 4 or 5 times, and I'm just layering the flower right on top of each stem and just going over it continuously all the way around until I got completely done with our little wreath here. So here it is, and here is the little candy dish all dry. Here is our little wreath. I'm gonna set this aside for now. And I'm going to attach our lamp part to our post. Just going to use a bunch of hot glue there. I guess, you know, you're going to see me fanning it here for a second. I guess I wanted it to cool down a little bit before I put the plastic on there. I wasn't really sure if it was going to melt it. So, so once that's done, I am now going to start on my little pumpkin. I don't know if I would call this a topiary. I'm going to call it a pumpkin stack. So this is what was in our inspiration photo. There was this little stack of pumpkins next to it with a little jack-o'-lantern face or a little happy face. And so I'm just recreating my version of that. I did not bother to paint the orange pumpkin. I wanted to keep it orange. And then I'm using these fall leaves from the Dollar Tree and this other little green pumpkin that my sister had picked up from the Dollar Tree for me. Just using hot glue. Now those foam pumpkins, that one that I have at the base, it does not like hot glue. So just be real careful if you're going to use hot glue with the foam, because it likes to melt it. Then I've got this other little scarecrow guy from the Dollar Tree, and I'm using him for my little top piece. And then it'll sit right next to the lamppost. I am not gluing this down. Isn't it cute? I'm not gluing it down because, like I said, I want to be able to switch this out for various times of year. So I've got my little leaves I'm adding in there, and now I'm just showing you a hook from the Dollar Tree. It's like a thumbtack with a hook on it. And I stuck that into my little post to hold our wreath. And then the final touch, dropping a little battery-operated votive inside, and here it is. Let me know what you think. I love this so much. I can't tell you how excited I was when this all came together. Now we are going to make this for the holidays. You could totally use the little Santa gnome that we did a couple of weeks ago, but I am going to do something different. I bet you can't guess. If you have followed me for any bit of time, you know I love snowmen. So I'm going to make a snowman. I've got a bunch of, that little round is like a remnant from some other thing that I pulled apart from the Dollar Tree. I've got a few different sized ornaments. I think one of them might be from Michael's, and then the other two are from the Dollar Tree. And I'm using my little this is a wood burning tool. I have yet to use it actually on wood. I usually am melting plastic with it. So I'm cutting out holes in my ornaments, and this is to help them lay flat. So the bottom one, I want to be able to sit flat on the base, and then I want them each to be able to stack nicely and sit one on top of the other. So that's why I did that. So you can see here that they stack just nicely. So there we go. So once I've got that done, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to glue my 3 ornaments together. I'm not going to adhere them to the base just yet. I want to make sure that I've got them all set and painted and all of that before that happens. So just using a really good amount of glue and getting my snowman together, and then I came in with paint. And I did kind of like pat it to kind of, I'm making a mess right now, but to give it a little bit of a snowy effect and a texture to the paint. So a couple of these already had a little bit of texture because of the glitter on them, but hopefully you get what I mean. So now I'm going to go ahead once it's dry and apply it to its base. And then I'm going to decorate him. So I'm using one of my Arteza paint markers to kind of get my little orange nose ready, and I'm going to trim that off. I did blunt the tip of that so it's not super pointy, but making his little carrot nose. And I'm going to do just a teeny tiny little dab of paint on there, or paint, hot glue, so I can stick it to his face. Now these little branches are from my stash. They came from a twig broom that I've been using for projects. It was one that I'd gotten at the grocery store. It smelled like cinnamon. I don't know. I've been making all kinds of stuff with it for like a year now. So I went ahead and cut those down, applied his little arms, and now I am using black adhesive felt to make his eyes, to make his mouth, and to make his little buttons. And I'm just going to kind of speed through this because I'm sure you all know exactly how to do this. So I just cut them all by hand. No, template or anything like that, but just got him all dolled up. And then I went to my stash and I pulled out, this is a Keurig cup. So this is my trash to treasure part of the project. But I kind of bent that little hole back out again so it was hidden, painted it black with my chalk paint. I had these tiny little red berries that I set down there on my craft table. And now I am cutting out some holly leaf shapes. You can totally draw on the back of the felt and then cut out your drawing. I just kind of winged it. So I'm going to go ahead and apply these to his little hat so he is all handsome and adorned. So getting the little holly leaves on there, and then I'll add the berries right there in the middle. And this was like a double set of berries. It was like 6 total. So I put a little glue on the 3 and I was holding on to the others so I didn't burn myself. And then I just pulled them away. So once his hat is all done, I'm going to apply some hot glue to the inner rim and putting that on his little head. And then I went and grabbed this ribbon from my stash. This is one of my Kirkland ribbons, and I thought it was really cool because it goes from like a dark cranberry color and fades kind of rainbowish, but it goes from that dark cranberry all the way down to green. And I just thought it was a really pretty little ribbon that I could create a scarf with. So it is a wired ribbon, so you can see it's kind of giving it some shape. Maybe it's fluttering in the wind, I don't know. But I just tied that around his neck, and then I evened up the ends. And sometimes I find it really hard to cut these ribbons. They want to like slide away from my scissors. I don't know why that is, but then I just kind of like frayed up the ends a little bit. So now I am taking some more of these garland ties. I'm taking one and just creating a circle, bending it all around itself so that it remains in a hoop. And I am going to start doing the same thing that we did earlier around those other hoops, but this time we're going to make a full wreath. So just cutting these in half, then bending them the halves in half and wrapping them around our little circle. So I'm going to adorn this with some, I'm calling these mini poinsettias. I think there's another name for it, and I can't remember what it is. I got them at the Dollar Tree, but these little cute red flowers, I thought that they'd look really pretty on our wreath. So I'm just kind of piecing the leaves together with the flower buds and getting those all set on the wreath. Then I'm coming in with some Dollar Tree ribbon. This is a really pretty red satin ribbon, and it's got some gold running through it, and I just thought it was really pretty. So just creating loops, and then I'm going to create the little piece that makes the bow. I'm just basically tying a knot around it, and then I'll also use that piece that I just tied to attach it to the little mini wreath here. So tucking that through the garland ties and around the back, grabbing a hold of it and tying what was supposed to be a knot. It wasn't quite long enough to do a double knot, so I came in and I secured it with some hot glue. And then I just trimmed off the ends and put down a little extra glue just to make sure that it wasn't going to come undone. So now we have our wreath to adorn our lamppost. So there's our little snowman and our little wreath. So far so good. We're going to add our snow. So I have this, I don't even know what this is called, but it's kind of like a snow blanket that you can use with little Christmas villages. And I am just taking a piece of it that I'd cut up and going to position it around my lamppost. I am not securing this because I do want to be able to switch out the decorations with this lamppost throughout the seasons. So let me know what you think. DIY number 6. For this project, I am going to be using my Moss Waverly chalk paint, as well as the craft sticks. These are like tongue depressor sticks. The heart that I picked up at the Dollar Tree, this one's all glittery, but we're going to be painting it over. I also have 4 frames, also from the Dollar Tree, all the same. They have to be identical. And then a bunch of greenery that I have from Walmart. So I'm just taking off the little extra heart from the middle there, as well as the hanger, and I'm going to go ahead and paint this. Now, if you watch my channel a lot, you know I normally just paint right out of the bottle. In this instance, I am not, because this is covered with glitter, and I didn't want to risk having glitter end up on my paintbrush and then me sticking my paintbrush into the bottle. So that is why I did that. But I coated it both sides, set it aside to dry, and now I am working on my frames. So I started pulling these all off and then realized that I wasn't going to need to use the back of these frames at all, so you can just leave them on and just take the whole back off. So went ahead and set everything else aside. Then I also took my glass out. I am going to be using the glass, so I just set that aside for a little bit later. Got all my frames together, and then I started using my Star Bond. This is the medium Star Bond CA glue or super glue. And you know what? I was struggling with the medium for whatever reason. I don't know if it's the type of material that the frame is made out of, but you can see I'd flipped it over. I tried, you know, securing it with my little vice clips, and it just wasn't working. So I came in with some hot glue and just kind of smoothed that out in between the crevices. I want to be able to come in afterwards with some of the craft sticks to make it a little bit more secure, so I didn't want the hot glue sticking up too much. So that's what my thought process was there. So now I'm like, well, how do I deal with this gap? Thought about hot glue. I didn't do it. I came in with my thick Star Bond glue, which is also a wood filler. Now, these frames are not wood. They're like a heavy foam, I would say. So the Star Bond actually did serve its purpose here, and it filled in that gap for the most part, but not entirely. So I'll show you in a minute what I do. And I couldn't tell that it wasn't completely filled in until after I came in with the paint. So I'm just doing a heavy dry brush with my plaster by Waverly. This is chalk paint. And now I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, I can see all these gaps, I don't like it. So what did I do ultimately? Yeah, I came in with the hot glue and I just ran a bead all the way down along each of these gaps. And then I just went back over it with the plaster to cover that up. And it actually worked out quite well. And this little thing is pretty darn secure now. So then I flipped it back over, I placed all of my glass pieces in, and then I came in with my hot glue to secure them in so that they would be a little bit more permanent and fixed in, because again, I'm not putting the backs back on these, so I needed to make sure that the glass was going to be secure. And I just did hot glue on 2 of the edges. So now there was a little bit of a gap between the glass and where I would want to put these craft sticks to make sure that everything is secure. So, and I don't want to be able to see the sticks through the glass. So I ended up cutting them down the middle, and then I slid the half craft sticks in underneath the little lips that are there to secure the backs of the frames. I hope this is making sense. It's kind of hard to explain, but hopefully you're getting it based on what I'm doing here. And then I just ran a whole bunch of hot glue along that, and then I added another popsicle stick. So like those little lips that hold the backings of the frames were sandwiched between the 2 layers of the craft sticks. And then I added them around the perimeter also, just to help secure the frame in place, or the glass, excuse me. So now, once I have that together, I set that aside for right now, and I'm coming back to my heart now that it's dry, and I'm pulling apart all my picks. You guys know me, I'm always pulling apart the picks. I did try to see if maybe I could keep them intact, and it just wasn't going to happen. They were just too large for this little heart and what I wanted to do. So I came in, and one by one, I attached these little pieces of the Greenery picks to the heart, and I just kept layering it. I tried to go from the inner edge at first and then from the outer edge, just to make sure that everything was covered. And then I kind of kept alternating back and forth from the outer edge to the inner edge, from the inner edge back out to the outer edge, and just went around the entire perimeter of the wreath form. Well, what I'm calling a wreath form. So once that was all done, I have my little Greenery heart here. And I came back in with some ribbon. This is like a light gauzy kind of ribbon. And I thought I wanted to hang it from the inside of the wreath. And I thought, well, if I can put it on either side of the little point, it'll help to define my heart shape a little bit better. But as I was working with it, I'm looking at it and I'm trying to get it to work, and I just wasn't happy with the way that it was looking. So ultimately I decided that I wasn't going to do it that way. I just didn't care for it at all. Here I am still playing with it. How long am I going to play with it before I give it up? So yeah. So I finally decided it wasn't working for me. So instead I flipped it over, I took the same ribbon and I folded over the ends, and I'm just going to attach it to the back of my little wreath, for lack of a better term. So once that was all glued down and secured, I went ahead and flipped it back over. Of course, I wanted more glue. Flipped it back over, and then I centered it on my window frame, and then I'm going to attach it to the back of the frame. So I just ran a nice bead of hot glue down that craft stick. I probably did it like 3 or 4 inches, just because I wanted to make sure that that was nice and secure and not going anywhere. And then I trimmed that off, tucked my ribbon under, and I went ahead and glued that down some more. So now I decided it needed a little something more, and so I'm just making a little loop bow with some scraps of the ribbon that I had. So basically you just create a loop and then you tie another piece of ribbon around the center to make your tails. That's really all that you do. And then I used those tails to also attach it to the ribbon at the top. Once that was done, I went ahead and I dovetailed my ends just to finish it off. DIY number 7. I am super excited. This is my inspiration picture. I saw it at Hobby Lobby. It was like 120 bucks. We're using Dollar Tree supplies. Well, I thought I was going to be using those tubes. They didn't work out. I have a couple of different sized buckets here. I went with the small ones eventually. I also have some paper towel holders that I am going to kind of dismantle a little bit. So that larger ring was able to just pop right off. It just took a little bit of bending it back and forth and it popped off. And then I am going to trim off those other little pieces that are sticking out there. I'm just using my heavy gauge wire cutters, and I just was able to score it until it came off. It actually worked out a lot easier than I had anticipated. I wasn't sure if that was going to break off. So I am just trying to figure out placement for everything here, because I'm using the paper towel holders to attach my little buckets. So also using these little blocks. These wooden blocks are from the Dollar Tree as well. I think they come in a pack of like 50. And just using them as a little ledge to adhere my buckets. Now, when you do this, I was using hot glue for the sake of ease and time, but if you want this to be permanent, I do recommend using E6000 or something of that nature, because they did pop off on me a couple of times when I was bumping them and knocking things around trying to get all of the elements working here, because it did take quite a bit of trial and error on my part, and I'll share a little bit more about that as I go, but I figured it all out so you don't have to. So now I'm coming in with my Arteza outdoor acrylic paint, and I decided to use the outdoor paint even if I decide to use this indoors, because we are going to be using water with this. So I figured the outdoor acrylic paint was most likely going to hold up the best. I'm using the black that I went through with first, and then I have a battleship gray color that I'm coming in and using, and then I'll also use the silver, and I'm just looking to get that galvanized look. So coated all surfaces with it, including the inside of the little buckets. For the inside, I couldn't get in there with my sponge, so I just was using my little chippy brush to do it, and it did a great job. So once I had all of that done and had them looking the way I wanted, I created a rust tone with my red and my chocolate brown, and I am just going to hit that with in all the little places where you would normally anticipate seeing rust. So like on the lip of the bucket and any of the joints, that sort of thing. And then I did put some on my little Fleur Jardin little fun thing to just make it look like it had some rust too. Then I was securing everything inside. Now this was my attempt at using those balloon sticks. These are tubes, you know, it probably could have worked for me. But yeah, they were just a little bit rigid. When I tried to actually bend it without using my heat gun, it snapped. So if you do decide to try to use these for some other project, just know that you can't just bend them. But I fashioned it all together, and I had what I thought might work, and so I'm filling it up with water because I was determined and convinced that I was going to be able to siphon the water in a way that it would flow and do what I needed it to do. I just figured, you know, as long as I had the dimensions right, yeah, that doesn't work. And here I am attempting again. I'm like, oh, well, I'll create a little water tower on the side and maybe that will help. Yeah, it was basically just extending my tube. So when you siphon water, to have it work properly, your exit point must be lower than your entry point. And I spent probably a good couple of hours learning this the hard way because I was just convinced that there was some way to do it. And there technically is, you can create a heron's fountain, but I learned that that was something I would have to flip over constantly to get the water to continue to flow. So yeah, you could do it that way and not use power, but I ultimately went with a little pump. Now I'm sealing in the base all around here because during my trial and error, I did find that this is not completely watertight. So if you're going to use this for water, you definitely want to seal that. So now I've shown you the first pump that I attempted, and this is something that I found on clearance at Lowe's. It was like $4. So I was really excited to find it. It's a little pond pump. didn't really occur to me at the time that when it said that it could pump water up 2 to 3 feet in the air, it might be a little bit too strong for this project. So at any rate, I've got my tubing all set. I am getting my pump ready to test, and water went everywhere. I'm like, oh no, oh no. And now the only way to turn it on and off is to unplug it. And so now my hands are covered with water. I'm trying to get this to stay inside. So, I mean, you can't even really see here the extent of the water, and there was water everywhere. So I'm like, okay, what do I do with this thing? Because I'm by myself. How do I shut this thing off? So I finally got it wedged in there. I was able to dry off my hands. Yeah, it was an experience. So now I'm like, what do I do? So I made a trip to the pet store and got a different pump. So I ended up getting a little aquarium pump. So now, as I had seen with that first attempt, the water was going, you know, a little bit too forcefully, and it was also overshooting my buckets. So I did heat up my hot glue here, and I moved my little paper towel holder gadgets to the far outsides of my basin, which is really where I wanted them in the first place. So that worked out well. So here I am setting up the new pump. This is the aquarium pump, and it was for, I think, like a 30-gallon fish tank, and this was perfect. And I was able to use the same tube and everything. And now I'm just coming in with some hydrangeas from the Dollar Tree just to cover up the pump and make it look pretty. DIY number 8. I have a little candy dish from the Dollar Tree. I've got my yellow Sunny Porch chalk paint by Home Decor. I have 3 of these candlestick holders from the Dollar Tree. I had already glued a couple of them together when I was planning for a wedding that was supposed to take place, and then COVID hit. So these have been repurposed for other projects in the meantime. So I am using my E6000 along with some hot glue for the immediate hold to add that third one on there. And now I'm going to prep my little candy bin and give it a good couple of coats of the Sunny Porch chalk paint. So once that is all done and dry, I'm coming in with my little LED light from the Dollar Tree, and it has a twist-off base, and I was just trying to figure out whether I was going to be able to get it out of there once I had secured it, because I want to be able to replace the batteries in it. So I decided it was going to be possible, so I went ahead and attached it to the bottom of that candy dish. I flipped it upside down and put it on my little candlestick holders, and you can see me pressing down on it, just testing that it's going to work that way to turn my little lamp on and off. So now I'm just using the eraser end of a mechanical pencil to add little polka dots to my lampshade, because I decided it needed a little something extra. So coming through with my white chalk paint to add that on, and just setting my little shade on top. You can see how that came through. So now I have this pack of, it was a value pack of all these little wood pieces from the Dollar Tree, and I pulled out these large popsicle sticks and a few other odds and ends. So I trimmed off the ends of the popsicle sticks. Now I'm using a regular size popsicle stick that I cut in half, and I'm just making a miniature sign using my wood glue as well as my hot glue to piece all of this together so that it'll have that long-term bond, but then I also have that immediate hold so that I can keep working with it. I went ahead and gave it a coat of my Adirondack white chalk paint and set that aside to dry. And while that's drying, I am using my little odds and ends, and I'm going to use my Arteza acrylic paint markers, and I am painting the little hearts white, and then I'm going to come in with my lemon yellow, and I'm going to paint this oval yellow, and then come back in with black and create these fuzzy little lines across the body of, can you guess, my little bee. So I really liked how with the wood it was allowing the black to bleed a little bit. I probably had not waited until the yellow was fully dry, which probably also assisted with that, and it just made me happy because it made it look even a little bit more fuzzy, which a bee tends to be. So now I'm attaching his little heart wings to his body with some hot glue. And then I figured out where I wanted to place him on my sign, using more hot glue to secure him there. And then using my Arteza chalk marker, no, sorry, not my chalk paint marker, this is an acrylic paint marker, to just draw a little dotted happy on my sign, as if my little bee had been buzzing around and did an air drawing of the word happy. So once I had my sign set, I took these cute little clothespins that were also in that value pack, and I'm trying to decide where I want to hang it, what height I want to hang it at on my sign. And I'm using some Dollar Tree baker's twine, and I'm just trying to figure out the length of the twine there. And then I've started to try to tie it to my clothespins like that, and then ultimately decided it was going to be a lot easier if I just took it off and did it and then replaced it. So I tied my little string to my clothespins. I wrapped that string around the base of the lamp once just to secure it, and then I hooked everything together, and you can see my little lamp works just nicely, just popping it on and off. I love this. I hope you love it too. Please leave me a comment and let me know what you think. DIY number 9. For this project, I am using Dollar Tree items, these socks that I found, as well as some leftover mop head strands that I used in another project, and a Dollar Tree pick. So I'm taking the first sock and I am just going to cut it off right at the top of the heel area, and then I'm going to flip it inside out, and I'm going to use my brand new Sure Bonder, a hot glue gun that I am so excited about because I was in desperate need of a new glue gun, and I just sealed that so that I had just no hole in the bottom of my sock any longer. I tried flipping the top part in, decided that wasn't really going to work for me, and so I just cut that off as well. And now I'm coming in with some of those glass stones, those flat stones or beads, I'm not really sure what you would call them, from the Dollar Tree. And that's just really to weight down the bottom of my socks. So I put a couple of handfuls in there. Now, I ran out of fiberfill, so I was using the sock scraps, and now I'm using, just some rags that I had from an old t-shirt, and I'm going to seal it off with a rubber band at the top. We use what we've got, right? So now I am going to cut out the heel and cut off the toe in my second sock. I was looking at that for a second thinking maybe I can make a nose out of that, and then I decided I didn't want the nose to be red. So I am now attempting to seal that seam that from where I cut out the heel, and I was struggling with this a little bit, and then I finally realized, Corie, just put some of your parchment paper in there. The glue isn't going to stick to that. You'll be able to make your seam. So that's what I did. And I came in, just ran a bead of hot glue and then folded it over on itself so that it would create a seam. And I did that with it right side out so that once I opened it up again, everything was right. And I'm going to use that seam to my advantage for where the hat flops over. So I'm good with that seam. So I cut off the top part of what's going to be a hat at a bit of an angle, and I'm sorry I'm a little off camera here, but I'm just cutting that more triangular in shape. You can see it now. And then I'm going to go ahead and seal that edge and make a seam for the little hat. Once I have that all sealed up with the hot glue, and you could totally sew this if you'd rather, but I'm just finding it really easy to hot glue. Turn it right side out again, and then I just put it on the little body to make sure that it was going to fit properly. Stuffing the hat with some of my other sock remnants, waste not, want not, right? Because I wanted to just make sure that the hat was going to stand up the way I wanted it to on the on top of the body, because she needs a head, right? So I'm going to now come in with the mop strands, whatever you want to call them, and I'm going to wrap them around the top of that little nubby thing that I had created with the rubber band until I get enough of them on there so her hair is nice and full, pulling the hat back down over top of it. And now I am just trying to see if one of my little wood beads will work for her nose, and I was pretty happy with that. So I went around and sealed the hat down so that when I started messing with her nose, it wouldn't all come apart on me. So went ahead and sealed all of that, parted her hair, and tucked the little wood bead in and secured it with some more hot glue. And this wood bead set is something that I had gotten on Amazon. If you're interested in that, it is in my Amazon store, and the link is in my description box. So now I'm coming through and I am just unraveling all of her strands of her hair, and then I decided she was looking a little Rapunzel-like, so I wanted to give her a bit of a haircut. So I came through with my scissors and just trimmed off some of that excess. I kind of liked the way it looked with it kind of hitting the table, but I didn't want it like puddled. So her nose was causing everything to split apart down the middle though, and I wanted that to be full, so I did decide to come in with some of the pieces that I had trimmed off to fill in that little area under her nose. And I was careful to do a thin enough layer that when I hot glued under there, it was not going to be noticeable, so all of the little ends are completely hidden. You cannot see them. To make it thicker, I folded that up and tucked more in underneath so that, again, they would be camouflaged and you would not see the ends of these little strands that I was adding in there to fill in that kind of hole that the nose was making. So then I went ahead and trimmed off her hair here and there a little bit just to get it the way that I wanted it. And once I'd had that all set, I'm just messing with her hair some more. And then I brought in my little flowers. I pulled off 3 little blossoms from the pick itself and hot glued those to her little hat. And this is actually covering up some glue that I'd gotten on the right side of the hat when I was trying to make that seam earlier. So happy accident. It just gave me reason to decorate her hat a little bit. And so I also wanted her to be holding a little blossom branch. So went back to my little wood bead stash and pulled out a smaller wood bead, and that's going to be her little fist. And so I was able to tuck the floral stem right in there, and that she'll be able to hold it. But then I decided she needed an arm too, and I was trying to judge how long her arm needed to be. I'm using smaller little wood beads for this. I'm going to be attaching this to her body, so I'm kind of trying to gauge how far out that's going to have her little hand sticking. And ultimately I decided I really only needed 2 of those beads, so I just popped it right back off. The beauty of hot glue. If you want it again to be a more permanent hold, you will want to use E6000 or something of that nature. Wood glue would work great with these, but I was happy enough to just be using the hot glue for this purpose. So I had glued her little arm to her body, and now I'm gluing her little wrist, or her fist, excuse me, to her arm. And so she'll just be holding that little blossom branch. And she just makes me so happy. Of course, I gotta fix her hair again. And there she is. Let me know what you think of this project. I just absolutely adore her. DIY number 10. This is my inspiration photo. It's from Balsam Hill. I thought it was so pretty. So I am starting out with one of these Dollar Tree 3D wreath forms, and I had already put it together. I used it in another project a few videos ago that I decided I was going to take apart. I did remove that little gadget with all the little feet on it that helps hold the form in place. You can see that I still have it at the bottom here, but I decided to replace one end the top end actually with some twine just to give it a little bit more stability. I just wanted to make sure that it was going to be nice and solid and tight, and I went ahead and used some hot glue there just to make sure my knot wasn't going to come undone. So I'm showing some floral foam that I tucked in at the bottom in that little doodad that sticks up that holds the wreath form together, and I'm setting it just on this little wire bowl to help keep it from rolling around as I work with it. The greenery that I have here is from Walmart. I believe it was $2 a stem, so $1.99. And as you can see, true to form, I have cut it all apart so that I can use the individual little pieces. I'm tucking it in and around the base there. Now, it occurred to me as I was doing this that I probably should have put the lights on first. So word to the wise, after you put in the floral foam, you might want to go ahead and add your lights in. That way you're not having to contend with all of the little greenery. So I am just taking my light strands, these are also from the Dollar Tree, and I am wrapping them around my wreath form. So you can see one strand of lights, these are 3 feet long, and one strand will go completely around the circumference of one of these parts of the wreath. Now I only had 3 of them, but there are 4 circles to this wreath form, so I ended up using another type of light that I just picked up recently from the Dollar Tree, and it's got little fall leaves on it. And then I'm tucking in some of my Dollar Tree pumpkins. I thought I would try these little orange ones. They were too shiny compared to the other ones I had. So I tucked in that other little one, and this made me so happy. I have this other pick from the Hobby Lobby that I had in my stash. I think it was $2.99 originally, but I tend to always get my Hobby Lobby stuff when it's on sale at least 40% off. So I am ripping this one apart too into little pieces, and I'm tucking it in and around just where it looks pleasing to my eye. And you could use any types of greenery with this. You could use any types of pumpkins. You could use not pumpkins. You could use just other types of florals if you'd like. Whatever is going to make your heart happy. I started to use that chain that my sister had given to me from a chandelier she took down, and then decided I was going to use the Dollar Tree little hook thing. This is for a plant hanger, I believe. So one of those little plant hanging baskets. And I'm just hooking it right on to my 3D wreath, and it is good to go. DIY number 11. So for this project, I have a couple of ornaments from the Dollar Tree, a pair of socks from the Dollar Tree, an old ornament from my stash, and some other items from the Dollar Tree that are left over from other projects. I'm taking one of those socks and I just cut off the little foot part of it, and I'm going to drop some of these glass beads that I picked up from the Dollar Tree in the bottom to weight it down. And then I was thinking, because I'm out of fiberfill again, if you have fiberfill, this is where you'd want to use it. But I thought I'd use some of this packing material. It was just too stiff, so I pulled it out of there and decided to shred it, and then I put it back in, and it worked much better. A little bit messy, but it did the job. Once I had that all filled, I went ahead and sealed up the top. I just used a little twist tie, twisted that around there, made sure that it was good to go. So now I'm looking at the other part of that sock, trying to figure out if I can use that for what I'm doing or if I need something else. It's not quite long enough, so I'm like, you know what, I think I've got another sock in my stash. So I went back and grabbed another Dollar Tree sock. This is left over from another project, so it's the singleton sock, and I am just pulling it down over and figuring out how it will fit. So I went ahead and shredded up some more of that packing material and stuffed the little sock, which is going to be our hat if you hadn't already figured that out. And once I had that good to go, I put it back down over the little body. So I'm just making sure it's all good, and now I'm going to take this little gold ornament from the Dollar Tree, and I cut off the little knobby thing, and I'm going to tuck it in under the hat and glue it down. Just using a little bit of hot glue there. And then I'm also going to bring my hot glue in, and I'm going to use that around the sides of the little nose and make sure that the hat is going to stay in place where I want it there. And then I went ahead and also sealed around the edge so that the hat was nice and secure. So now I am taking this leftover dust mop thing from the Dollar Tree. Obviously this has already been cut once before. I used it for another project, and I'm just measuring where I want to cut it for this project. And I'll just tell you, this stuff sheds a lot. I ended up with it all over my shirt, so forgive my appearance later when you see little white things all over me. But once I had it cut down to size, I went ahead and glued it down with my hot glue and just made sure that was all nice and secure. So now I'm cutting the little hanger off of this cute little ornament that I had picked up last year. I thought it was super cute, and I know they're little elf legs, but they are going to be our gnome's legs. And I'm just using a generous amount of hot glue, setting his little bum right down in there, and he's got legs. So now I'm using some leftover yarn, and this is that chenille yarn. Again, something else that kind of has a lot of fuzz to it, but I wanted a nice fluffy little pom-pom, so I wrapped it around my fingers as many times as I could. I'm tying off the center with a piece of sturdy twine, making sure that's nice and tight. I'll trim off the excess, and then I'm going to cut all of the loops on here and create a pom-pom. And because it's crazy yarn, I just went ahead and gave it a haircut and trimmed it up until it was looking like a pom-pom should. And then I used some hot glue to secure that at the tip of his little hat. So I decided that I hadn't cut down the beard enough. I had just sent a quick picture to my sister, and she was laughing and said that he looked like a snowball. So I decided I was going to remove a little bit more of his beard because I could definitely see what she was saying. So here he is, and he definitely needs some arms. He looks a little funny without arms here. So I took that leftover piece of sock that I couldn't use before, and I am going to cut out the Be Mine so that I have just that solid piece, and then I'll also cut the stripes off of it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the stripe part off and set that aside, and now I'm going to cut this in half. So I'm just folding it in half, cutting it down the middle so I make sure that my both sides are even, and then I am going to create little arms by folding it inside out. I'm going to use my hot glue again, and I'm going to create a little seam all the way down the length of it and kind of curving it at the end because it's going to be like little mittens. And I thought it was so great that I had that white band at the end there so that I could do that. So I did that to both of them, and once they were dry, or cool I should say, I went ahead and turned them right side out, and so I have my little arms. I'm just using a paintbrush to help kind of push the sock fabric right side out. Now I'm using a little bit more of that packing material. I just pulled a strip of it off because I just wanted the arms to have a little bit of structure to them. So you could use fiber fill if you want for this as well. So, but it doesn't need a whole lot, just enough to give it a little bit of structure, like I said, so it doesn't just flop. Sealed that up with some hot glue, and now I've got my little arms. I'm just going to figure out where I'm going to place them on either side of him, and you guessed it, more hot glue. So sealing his arms to the sides of his body so that his little hands meet in the front. I love him so much. He makes me happy. Then I'm taking this little Christmas tree ornament from my stash, and I am just going to have him hold the ornament. So again, just a little bit of hot glue on each of his little mittened hands, and then he'll be all good to go with his little Christmas tree. But I love him so much, and I hope you love him too. DIY number 12. So for this project, I have a wood round. It was part of a pack of, I believe it was 3 from the Hobby Lobby. I've had it for a while. And I gave that a coat of my white paint, and then my little Farm Fresh cutout, that's from the Dollar Tree. It was a pack of like 6 different ones, and I gave that a red coat. And then I decided I didn't want the white super white, so I used a little tiny bit of antique wax by Waverly, and I'm going over this with a baby wipe. Once it was dry, I secured my little Farm Fresh sign with hot glue, and then I grabbed some tumbling tower blocks, and I was thinking that these would make good tree trunks. Eventually I did swap that out, but for the time being, I'm just trying to decide how I want to form my little branches for my evergreen trees. So I'm just giving them a little haircut because sometimes these little evergreen ties look better when they are just like trimmed up. So this is where I decided that I didn't really like the tree trunks. So I grabbed some skewers. These are also from the Dollar Tree. And I cut them down. I cut them, 3 of them, the same length. And once I had those all cut, I went over them with the antique wax too, and I made them nice and brown so that they would stand out against that backdrop. So I got all of my little branches ready, and I've got them kind of prepared on my sign the way I want them all lined up, just trying to figure out how they're going to be positioned here. So once I had them pretty much the way I wanted them, I went ahead and blowing away all the little extra the haircut remnants, and I am hot gluing down my little tree trunks, and then I'm going to come back with my branches and secure those as well. So just a little drop of glue right on the skewer where I want to place my branch, and I am just gluing all those down. And I did that with all 3 of the trees, and I did offset that middle one, so each of the bottoms of those trunks are about the same distance from the edge of the circle, so it just makes them look like they're different heights. And then I decided I wanted to distress it a little bit with some more white paint on the red, and then I decided I also wanted to make my little trees look a little bit flocked and snowy, so I just went over them with a very dry brush and gave them a little bit of white. And that's it. And I love this one too. Let me know what you think. DIY number 13. Project, I have this bucket. I don't know what you'd even call this. It's a metal tin something that I've had in my stash for a while. I'm honestly not even sure where I got it from, but it is definitely thrifted. And it has a little bit of a glitter all over it, which is sealed in, but yet it's still glitter, so I felt like it might be a little bit bumpy, and I wanted to smooth that all out. So I sanded it down and then also wiped it all down with one of my baby wipes, giving it a good couple of coats of Adirondack white chalk paint. And now I am using dry brushing with my Celery chalk paint by Waverly. So now I have this awesome tissue paper that I picked up at the Dollar Tree, excuse me, and I am using my Mod Podge to apply this to the tin. And I don't know if you can tell, there's a ridge all the way around the tin there between where I'm applying the tissue paper and where that dry brushing technique was. So now I'm using a piece of scrap fabric that I have. This ended up being the perfect length. I thought I might need both of these strips, but I basically wanted to make sure that they were as wide, a little wider than my bucket is tall. So I am using my hot glue, and I'm just running a bead along the top of that. I'm doing this right side out. So if you are inside out, I guess you can say, yeah, I said it completely backwards, inside out. So when you're applying it, you want the back side of your fabric to be facing you, because we're going to be flipping it over inside the bucket. So hopefully that's making sense. But I pulled that tight. I wanted to overlap those edges a little bit, and now I'm flipping it into the bucket, as I mentioned, and I'm going to create a seam here. And so I'm applying to the fabric some hot glue. I'm flipping over my edge there, and I'm just pressing that down. Now I'm gluing the fabric together. I'm not gluing it to the inside of the metal bucket. You certainly could, but I chose not to. I just am trying to just make sure that my fabric is coming together with a nice seam here. So you can see a little bit better in this shot what I was doing. So once I have that seam done, I'm going to take the rest of it, I'm going to fold it into itself here, and I'm going to create another seam so the inside of our bucket, basket, whatever you want to call it, is nice and finished. And I ran that glue all the way down and sealed that all the way down. So here I'm tucking that in, and our bucket is all set as far as that goes. Now I wanted to apply some ribbon, and this is the color that I wanted to use, but it was a little wide. So I'm actually going to fold it into thirds, and using my hot glue gun, I am just going to make sure that it stays that size all the way down the length of the ribbon that I want to use. So once I have enough to go around my entire bucket, bin, basket, I cut it off, and now I'm just using hot glue to apply it right on that ridge that I was mentioning before. I ran it all the way around the perimeter of my basket. When I got to the end, I thought about right here doing like a little funky bow kind of thing with the end of it, and then I decided it was too bulky and I didn't like the way it was going to stick out. So I trimmed it down, and I'm just going to flip over those edges, or flip under the edges, I should say, and glue that down with some hot glue. And that's it, you guys. I did come back in and just apply a little bit of extra glue here and there where I thought I needed it, but so simple and elegant and pretty. Let me know what you think in the comments. DIY number 14. For this project, I have a pine box that I actually got at the liquor store, of all places. This is a box that was used to store or ship, I'm assuming, wine bottles, and I happened to be at the liquor store and saw the boxes sitting there and asked them what they were doing with them, and they said, well, we're selling them for $2 a piece. So I bought all 3 that were there. So for this one, I was just pulling out the little staples that were still in it and got it fixed up with my wood filler, and then I was just showing you my chalk paint that I picked up at Habitat for Humanity Restore. This is the color Winter, and it is pretty much an exact match in color to the plaster chalk paint by Waverly if you're looking for something of the similar color. So I had painted the bottom part of my box. Now I am coming in with my Waverly Antique Wax and a baby wipe, and I am going to give a good coat to my lid of my box, and I'm coating both sides. Once that was all set, I set it aside to dry, and I'm taking 4 Dollar Tree plungers, removing the handles from the bases, and I'm just going to cut off that twisty, screwy part that goes into the plunger base. And now I'm just trying to figure out how much of these I need to trim off to just make sure that they are all the same length. I need them to be exact. So I am being meticulous in just making sure that they're all lined up and that I am cutting them all to the same length. Once I had them all cut, I went ahead and gave them a coat of paint with my winter chalk paint. And now I'm going to attach my lid to my box. I'm just deciding which side I want facing out, essentially. So I have these brass hinges that I had picked up from the Home Depot, and I am just going to attach them to my box. Now, I want to make sure that I have preset holes for these, because I don't want to split my wood, because this box is really, the wood is very thin. So as you can see, I'm actually using my little pokey tool from the Dollar Tree and my piercer, and I'm actually using that to go in because I did not have a drill bit that was small enough, and I figured that this would actually work. And since the pine wood is such a soft wood, it worked just fine. So once I had all of my holes set, and I had measured off both sides just to make sure that I was placing them in the same place before I started in with creating my holes. But then I was able to just screw them right in by hand, and I've got a working box with a lid. I was so proud of myself with this, you guys. So I'm going to flip that upside down. And on the bottom, I am going to adhere my legs, and I am just using some wood glue now. You do want to go back in and make sure that you're securing them with screws or nails or something. Screws are ideal from the inside down into the legs, because the glue probably is not sufficient to hold them. If it gets bumped sideways, you might end up breaking your legs off. So just a word to the wise. So now I'm using a 1x2 that I had picked up at the Home Depot. It's something like $1.18 for an 8-foot length. And I'm cutting that down to a size for braces all the way around. And I'm using my antique wax for these as well. So now when I had measured them off, I did it at the base. And I didn't account for the fact that they do taper slightly. So I found that they were a little bit too short, where I wanted to be having them about 6 inches from the tip of the foot, or the part that's going to hit the floor. So I was going ahead and using some large popsicle sticks to just use as little shims in there, and I'm attaching those with some wood glue to my braces before I attach the braces between my legs. Hopefully that makes sense. So using some wood glue for this, and I wasn't too concerned about how it was going to look, because I am planning on using another element to just secure everything even more. So I've got my little Dollar Tree level and making sure that everything is the same height and level and even. And as I mentioned here, I'm coming in with my jute twine from Walmart. This is a big roll that I had gotten a while back, and I had cut off a nice length. It was probably about, I would say, a 9 or 10 foot length of jute twine that I cut off so that I could work with it a little bit more easily here. And I'm just wrapping it around and going at an angle across, and you're going to see in just a little bit how that looks on the other side. And then I tied it off when I had it to where I wanted it. I'll trim off that little piece, and then I just used a little smidge of hot glue on the end of my knot to make sure that it wouldn't come undone. But here is my piece all finished, my little side table with storage. I'm very proud of it, and I cannot wait to hear what you think. Leave me a comment and tell me what you think of this piece. DIY number 15. So this is another thrift flip project, because that's what we're doing here today with Chemo. I got each of these, I believe they were $3 and $2 respectively, and I cleaned them up. They are metal cast iron, I think. Maybe not cast iron, wrought iron. Maybe that's what I'm looking for. I don't know. They're metal. And I thought they were really pretty. But I'm just coming in with some of my plaster colored chalk paint, did a dry brush technique on both of them just to make them a little more farmhouse. And these are all from the Dollar Tree. I have these fun jars that I'm going to add the hanging tops to and kind of turn them into lanterns here. This was such a fun and easy project. So you can see how the chains will allow them to hang. Now my chains are a little bit long for these pieces that I'm trying to hang them from. So I knew I was going to have to kind of jerry rig it a little bit. You can totally clip your chains and reattach them together to make them shorter. It would not be that difficult to do. I wasn't convinced that I was always going to want to hang these on these particular pieces, and so I wanted to have the option of changing it up and having the longer chains on them in the future. So I opted to just use this extra little wire that I have in my stash, and I just twisted it through the chains where I wanted to make it hang from, for lack of a better term. And then I went ahead and just twisted it in so it wouldn't get pokey. And then you can see that I wrapped the excess chain around there as well. So then I took these decorative stones from the Dollar Tree and I just added them in. I ended up just untwisting that because I figured it would be a little bit easier and I wanted to be able to put a candle in there too. So I just twisted it off. You can see it came off really easily. I used half of this little bag in each of my glass containers. And here they are all set up. I love these so much. Here they are all lit up. Let me know what you think in the comments. DIY number 16. This is, well, I guess some would consider it trash. It was from packaging from a fireplace, and I kept it. But it's a nice solid piece of wood. I gave it a coat of my Adirondack white chalk paint, and now I am drawing just a squiggly line to represent a string of lights. And I'm going to go ahead and add some light bulbs to my string. And I started doing this. I got the first one on, and then I started to do the second one, and I quickly realized that I really wanted them to be a little bit uniform in size and shape, and so I needed a pattern. So I went ahead and grabbed a piece of my parchment paper that I could use to trace the one and then use it to duplicate that same size and shape light across my string of lights. And I do that by just scribbling on the back side of it and then tracing over it again. So you can kind of see me here scribbling on it, and then I'll use that, flip it over, line it up with my little squiggly line where I want to have it, and then go ahead and trace over the line again. And I did that all the way down along the string until I had 10 of them. And now I am just going to very lightly write in the words that I want to have on this, and it will all become much more visible shortly. I was just going really lightly with my pencil to get myself all situated because I didn't really trust myself to come in straight away with the paint marker. Pencil is much easier to erase. So you can always repaint things if you have an oopsie, but I'd rather be able to just erase it and have a guideline to go with. So now I have my string of little lights, and I'm going to go ahead and pull out my drill. I'm looking for a drill bit that is going to be the same width as my little light bulbs, and you're going to see why in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead, and it helps if you have a drill battery that is fully charged, and this is where I'm realizing I need to go grab the other battery. So pop the new battery in, and that works much better. So I am drilling holes down in the bottom quarter, I guess you could say, or bottom third of my little bulbs. And I'm just measuring there to make sure that my string of lights is going to reach from one bulb to the next. This box happens to be hollow, so you can see it's got all sides except for the bottom. And so I'm going to be able to put all of my little light bulbs in the bottom. Before I do that, I'm just going to give it all like a little teeny tiny sanding around the holes, make sure that there aren't any jagged edges, nothing sticking out, and then I'll go in and I'm going to do the same thing on the inside. Just make sure that everything is nice and smoothed out and nothing pokey. So then I'm going to go ahead and take my little lights and I'm going to poke all of the little light bulbs through all the way down, and there are 10 lights. This is a string from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure they're all situated and taping them down with painter's tape. You could use duct tape. I just happen to have painter's tape handy, so that's what I'm using, and just taping down all of my little wires so they don't fall out and that they don't go pushing in too far either. Hopefully you know what I mean, because I didn't want them to stick out too far, which is why I set it face down on my table as I was doing this. So you can see here, all my little lights work. I think this is so cool. So once I had that situated, I pulled out my paint markers and I am gonna go ahead and start getting this all dolled up. I'm pulling out a red, I'm picking one of the two yellows. I've got a green that I selected, a blue, and then a purple. And then I'm also gonna be grabbing my brown. I decided I wanted to use, oh, and black, sorry. So I'm going to do my words first, apparently. So I am tracing that pencil line that I made earlier with my Arteza black paint marker, and I'm just doing my faux calligraphy. So I'm doing my letters, and then I'm going back and thickening out the areas where you would consider it to be a down stroke. So if you are interested in hand lettering and want me to do a video in real time, because remember, this is all sped up when I do this. It's sped up by about 3 times because I do not want to bore you guys. But if you are interested in a video specific on hand lettering where I would do it in real time, leave me a comment and let me know that, and I'll be happy to do it. But now I do have my brown paint marker, and that's what I'm using for my string for my lights, as well as the little nubbies, the base parts of the light bulbs. So I guess I could have used silver for that, but I just went ahead and used my brown, thinking it was part of the light string. And then I'm going in and I'm alternating my colors with my lights. These are just little Christmas lights, and I'm alternating them the way that I imagine they would be lined up on this string of lights. And once I had those all done, I can turn it on and I've got my little Christmas lights all lit up. I love this. Let me know what you think. DIY number 17. So this is a trash to treasure project. I haven't done a trash to treasure in a while, and I'm really excited about this one. This came off of a mirror that is part of my daughter's bedroom set from when she was a little girl, and she decided she didn't want this little frou-frou thing on the top of her mirror anymore, so we removed it and now it's just a square mirror. So I gave it a coat, actually a couple of coats of my chalk paint, my Home Decor black, and now I am applying a decal that I had created on my silhouette. I cannot talk tonight. My silhouette cameo. And I had made it a little bit too big. You know that saying about measure twice and cut once? Yeah, I only measured once, and then I forgot the measurement and I thought it was an inch taller than it really was. So I had to kind of cut it apart and piece it together, but it all worked out well in the end. I figured it out. So once I had my decal applied, I'm actually taking Elmer's school glue and I am just applying this all over the sign, and I bet some of you can already guess at what I'm going to be attempting here. I wanted to try a crackle paint technique. Now, this is the first time I've ever tried to do crackle paint. I probably should have researched it some more. I have a feeling that you all are going to be teaching me more on this video than I am teaching you right here, because I am looking forward to the comments on what I did wrong. So actually it did turn out really nice in the end. It just didn't crackle as much as I might have expected it to. I think it was a combination of perhaps not allowing the glue to dry quite enough. I probably should have let that dry a little bit longer. And then I think I probably applied my chalk paint with a slightly too heavy coat in areas. But at any rate, this is my plaster chalk paint that I used over top, and I'm coming in with my heat gun now and trying to get it to crackle. And it took a little bit of time, and you saw me kind of push that with my finger, I was getting all kinds of bubbles, right? So it was heating up the paint and the glue underneath, and it was bubbling in places, and I don't know, maybe it's supposed to do that. Is it supposed to bubble? You guys tell me. Those of you who have done crackle paint before, let me know if it's supposed to bubble. So you'll see me tapping on it here and there every once in a while, but I did get some really good big cracks in places, as you can see, and then some other places it was just, yeah, not a whole lot of anything going on. I did know that I have my image underneath here that I'm going to be peeling up, so I wasn't super concerned about it just yet. I was still optimistic. So I did come in and start peeling up my decal, and again, Miss Impatient, right? I probably should have let it dry a little bit longer than I did, but I was working with it. And so I skipped from the left side where I had started over to the right side where it was a little bit drier. I thought maybe that would work better. I just was very uncertain with this whole project because, again, I'd never done it before. And so I wasn't sure how long to let things dry. I didn't know if it would be harder to remove my decal if I waited too long or what. In hindsight, I'm thinking I probably should have let it all dry a little bit longer, but again, I'm looking forward to all your comments and suggestions for the next time I attempt to do this. And when you normally do your crackle paint, do you work with a decal like this, or is it usually just the crackle paint on the surface and then you're not really having a design on top of it? I don't know. Let me know. But at any rate, I just kept going through and peeling away my decal as best as I could. As I was peeling it away, it was picking up or taking some of the paint with it along the edges. And if I were not doing crackle paint, that would drive me insane. But because I wanted this to have an old look to it, the jagged edges was actually, in my opinion, adding to the charm of the piece and adding to the design. So I was really okay with it. And I actually felt like that was a benefit to what I was doing. So I don't know. You let me know if you agree or disagree. But it was fun attempting it, and ultimately, I really am thrilled with this piece. I now have it set above the doorway to my powder room on my first floor, so I see it all the time. And the way that my home is set up, it's at the end of a long hallway, and so you can see it all the way down the hallway, and I'm just so happy with it. I get to admire it every day. So now I've come in with some matte Mod Podge, and I'm sealing it all in just to make sure that nothing flakes away, and let me know what you think. DIY number 18. For this project, I am going to be using a funnel from the automotive section of the Dollar Tree, as well as some men's tube socks, also from the Dollar Tree. I'm using some of these glass beads that you can also get from the Dollar Tree, as well as a Dollar Tree mop head. And then I'm also going to be using a little bit of fiber fill from my stash. So the first thing I'm going to do is take one of the socks, and I'm just going to slide it right down over the funnel. You saw I didn't even take the label off the funnel. I pulled it down over, thought about rolling it back, and then decided against it. And then with the second sock, I am going to fill the bottom of it with some of these glass beads. If I were to be purchasing bags of the glass stones or beads, whatever you want to call them, from the Dollar Tree, I think one bag would probably be sufficient. Maybe 1.5, just to give you an idea. But it's really just to make sure that this is going to be able to stand up on its own and be anchored. And then you saw I didn't cut the sock, I just rolled the sock into itself until it was about the height that I wanted it. So now I'm coming in on the mop head and using my wire cutters to cut those little two plastic elements on either side, and you saw that just kind of broke away after I cut them, and I was able to get all of those threads out. Taking some of my fiber fill and stuffing this sock. This is going to be our body, so I want it to be nice and plump. And so just getting it to the plumpness, if you will, that I want it at, so that I make sure that it'll also be able to stand up on its own. Then I'm taking a number of the yarn pieces from the mop head, and I'm just lining them up because this is going to make for our gnome's little beard, and I just wanted everything to be even because I didn't want to have to trim anything off. So I folded them all in half, and I'm tucking them into the top of the sock and arranging them, and once I have them the way I want them, I'm taking our funnel covered with the sock and placing it on our gnome's little head. Then I'll come in with some hot glue, and I'm going to start at the back and just make sure I've got that all secured, and then I'll come in around the front and do the same. So coming in around the front, do the same thing there, and just make sure that it's all nice and secure the way that I want it. I'm being pretty generous with the hot glue there. And then I also decided to form his little hat a little bit more so it's pointy at the end. Again, I didn't even bother cutting it. I just formed it the way I wanted it, used a little hot glue, got it to be a little bit pointy towards the end, and I was all good there. So now I'm coming in and I am unraveling the yarns. Now you could totally leave them as is. I just felt like it looked like dreadlocks. So nothing wrong with dreadlocks, but I wanted it to be a little bit more full and fluffy with more strands. So that was the way that I decided to go. So I'm unraveling all of those yarn strands. And then I pulled out my Arteza felt, and this is self-adhesive felt, and I'm just searching for the colors that I want. I picked out a brown that I thought would match the socks, and then I also pulled out a peach color that would be like a skin tone. Now I set that aside for a second and pulled out a little styrofoam ball. This is what I'm going to use for his nose, and I stuck it on the end of a pick that I had left over from some florals, and I am just going to go ahead and give that a coat of plaster chalk paint. And then I'm also coming in with, I think this one is called Victorian. It's like a light pink. And I just want to make his little nose a little bit more pink. Excuse me. So while that's drying, I pulled out these hearts that I got from the Dollar Tree as well. If you saw my haul the other day, you're recognizing a lot of these supplies, but using a wooden heart and then this red felt heart, and I am going to go ahead and secure the felt onto the wood. I just wanted it to have a little bit more structure, which is why I'm layering it like this. And then I was also trying to figure out how to cover up that hole. Just go easy with the hot glue. I used a little bit too much there, and I was noticing it was kind of peeking through the felt. I didn't think that the felt would have it go through it. I thought it was thick enough, but just word to the wise. You ended up not being able to see it once it was dried, but I don't know, it was bothering me at the time. But then I decided I was going to go ahead and thread through some of this pink ribbon that I had picked up on sale at Michael's. If you decide that you want to do this, I do recommend weaving that through the heart, the felt heart, before you attach it to the wood piece. Obviously, I was able to do it, but it would have been a lot easier if I had done it in a different order. So now I'm just tying my little bow, and I'm just making sure that it's going to be positioned in a place that covers up that hole that I was talking about earlier. Just a plain old little shoelace bow. So now I am going to create my little hands with the peach toned felt. So I'm drawing out a little mitten hand, and I will actually create 4 of these. So 2 for each hand, 1 for the front of the hand, 1 for the back of the hand. So you can see there I've got my 4 pieces, front and back for each side. I'm just making sure that they line up. And I'm going to sandwich his little hands around the heart. This is how he's going to be holding the heart. So peeled off the little paper. I did not get it at the right angle when I first put it on here, but you know, happy accident. I ended up just deciding that I would have him hold the heart at an angle. So I actually think I like it better than having him hold the heart straight on. So I kind of lined it up with his little chest to see where I wanted to place the other hand, and then now you can see me putting that down as well. And again, just sandwiching it between the little felt pieces, because again, these are sticky and so they're adhering to each other, and it just allows him to be holding the little heart. So now I'm going to come in and do the same idea with making some arms for him with the chocolate brown felt. And you're seeing me cut off the end of the back side, or yes, the end of the back side of his arm. So I'm showing you here. So once I had all the pieces exact, I did cut off a chunk on either side, because I want to leave the front part of that adhesive exposed so that I have a way to adhere it to his body. So hopefully that makes sense. So you can see the front is going to be longer than the back. So now I'm applying the back side of his arm first, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply the front side of his arm, which again will be longer than the back. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that non-stick wrap that was on the back of it to just protect that while I work on the other one. Did the same thing there. And now I'm going to wrap it around his little body, making sure that those yarn pieces are out of the way, and just sticking the felt to his little sock body. So you can see there how I did that. So now, once the little nose is dry, I am parting the ways with his beard, and I'm going to stick that right down inside of there. Actually, is it hair or a beard? Maybe it's both. I don't know. It's coming down from his head, so I guess maybe it is hair. but it's serving the purpose for both, I guess. And came in with some hot glue and just made sure that that was nice and secure. Just fluffing him up, and there he is. DIY number 19. This is my gather sign. I love this. I'm going to show you how I did this with my Cricut. So this is a Dollar Tree home sign. I'm just going to pop off of that little heart shape, and we're going to use the back of this. So I'm going to prep it, taking out the little staples. Please don't do what I do here. I am obviously not being real safe using a knife to pop those staples out. They were not real in there real strong, so they popped out easily. Just be careful. I used my sanding block to smooth out where the staples had been, and now I'm just coming in with my Adirondack White by Home Decor chalk paint, and I'm making sure I'm getting all of the little edges as well. I am not worried about the back side because we can cover that up with craft paper and give it a really nice clean finish. So now my Cricut Explore 3, you guys, I was so excited to open this machine and check it out. I had heard wonderful things about it. As you know, if you've been watching me, I've had a different type of machine, and I was excited to see how this was going to compare. I was amazed at how easy this was. I have to admit, it is Bluetooth enabled, so all I had to do is plug it in. Oh, it was so cool when you press that little button and the machine like opens up. It's got storage little containers for all your little tools, and you can see me clapping. I'm all excited. And this is smart vinyl, so you do not need a mat for this vinyl that I'm using. I'm just turning my machine sideways to give myself a little bit more space, and then I'm going into the app, and I had set it up, and in the design space they had this gather sign, if you will, or design that was already created. So here I am getting ready to load my vinyl. The little app did want an update, so that took a couple of minutes, but that was it. And then you saw that little light flashing. It was like, hello, Corie, push me. And that's how you load the vinyl. So it lets you know. This is so easy. See it flashing again? It was like, okay, tell me to go. So I hit that little button again, and it was actually the other button, and it is cutting out my design. This literally took maybe 5 minutes to set up and cut out my design. It was amazing, so simple. So I am definitely a fan. So once it was all done cutting out my image, I just told it to unload. It tells you exactly what you need to do every step of the way. I'm just going to go ahead and trim it off. Because this was smart vinyl and I didn't need a mat, I was able to just leave it on the roll, and now I'm just cutting out the rest of the vinyl so as little waste as possible. Now I'm going to go ahead and weed it, And a lot of times, if I'm going to use the vinyl itself on my sign, I will weed out the stuff around the image. This time I'm weeding this like I would a stencil because I've decided I want to use all of that beautiful blue vinyl on my sign, and I'm going to have the letters knocked out. So the letters will shine through in white, and that's why we painted our sign white before. So I went ahead and got it onto my transfer tape, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply it directly onto the sign. I'm covering up that entire white area. I did leave some extra blue around. I knew that this was going to be larger than my sign itself because I wanted to make sure I could get this lined up, and then I will trim off the excess. And I know I've got a couple of straight lines there with the vinyl, having been a brand new piece of vinyl, so I'm using that to my advantage. I'm giving it a really good burnishing, and then I'll go ahead and remember what I'm doing and peel off the transfer tape. If I can do this, anybody can do this, you guys. So here it is. I'm just going to make sure it's nice and pressed down still so that when I lift it off the transfer tape, it didn't lift any of my edges up. And now I've got my little craft knife on my self-healing mat, and I'm just trimming off the excess vinyl. And then I will go ahead and put some craft paper on the back of it to clean that up, but I didn't show myself doing that. So here it is. I love this. Let me know what you think. DIY number 20. This is my inspiration picture for the next DIY. I'm doing things backwards. We're going to do the fall project at the end, so we're kind of, yeah, I flipped things around, but I am showing you all of the supplies we're going to be using here. So I have some pallet wood that I've had out in my garage. I had drilled some holes in the top of it. I eyeballed those holes, you guys, but then I set the boards together when I drilled them, so I made sure that they were exactly the same. They were about, if I had to guess, about a 1/2 inch in and a 1/2 inch down for the corner holes, and then that center hole was maybe about 2 inches lower than my corner holes. So just cleaning them all up with my Dollar Tree sand block, making sure that all of the rough edges are taken care of. I'm going to give it a good coat of paint with my silver lining chalk paint. Once that is all dry, I have these little drawer pulls I'd shown you before. I got these off of Amazon. They should be in my Amazon shop, and the link for that is in the description box. Went ahead and fastened those onto that center hole, and now I'm using some jute cord from Walmart to go ahead and fasten around the necks of my ball jars. I also got these from Walmart in a pack. I think it was like 12 to the pack, and I forget how much they were, but they were not all that expensive. I got them several months ago now, so I don't recall the exact price, but I am just tying that around the neck, cutting off a length that I can now tie back around. I had created a little bit of a slip knot on that first tie so that I could open up, like loosen the strand that was around the neck so that I could get my other piece in there to tie it off. I hope I'm making sense. It's late at night when I'm doing this, so I'm feeling a little brain dead. But I went ahead and I did the same thing to the other side, being mindful of the length so that I made sure that they were a matched set, right? I didn't want one hanging lower, noticeably lower than the other. So now I'm going ahead and I'm threading the jute cord through here. I was having a little bit of a hard time, especially since the paint inside the little holes there was still a little bit wet. So I'm using a skewer, and you'll be able to see better in a second what I did. But I basically started the jute cord through. So right here I'm kind of twisting it and pushing it through, and then I'm using the skewer to help get it through the hole a little bit more, and then I'm pulling it through on the other side. So once I had it through, I was able to go ahead and knot it off. Once it was knotted, I pulled it tight to make sure that my knot wasn't going to go slipping back through the hole, and then I went ahead and trimmed my ends off. And then I did the same exact thing on the other scones. So once I had that done, I went ahead and grabbed out my little fairy lights. I got these on Amazon recently. It was, I think that's a pack of 12, and I want to say, they were $15. I could be wrong on the price, forgive me. But I will have this in my Amazon store as well in case you want to check them out. I thought they were really cool. And so I just kind of unraveled them and then just let them tuck right inside of there just randomly. And then I'm tucking the little battery pack behind the little jar. And I'm going to go ahead in a second and grab my tape. This is my double-sided tape. If you have Velcro, I wish I had Velcro because that was what I wanted. I thought I had some in my stash, couldn't find it. So I'm using double-sided tape. But if you have Velcro, use Velcro because that will allow you to pull those off when you need to change the batteries without a lot of fuss. I'll probably be able to pull it off anyway. I'm just going to have a bigger mess to deal with. So highly recommend Velcro for this with the on-off switch facing up so that you can turn them on and off easily. And our flower picks are going to hide that, so you will not see that when the project is finished. So I've got my Dollar Tree picks here. This is a rare occasion when I am not going to cut my picks apart. I'm actually going to tape them together. So I've got 4 of these picks and I'm going to take 2 at a time. And I am going to use my florist tape and I'm going to wrap and wrap and wrap and create a single pick with this. So when you use this tape, it's actually kind of funky because when you pull it, it stretches, and when it stretches, it gets sticky, and then it sticks to itself, but it also likes to stick to me. So I'm not a florist, you guys, and I've got another project at the end of this video that's going to prove that even more. But at any rate, once I had it all together, I went ahead and fluffed it out, and I'm pulling some of the pieces of the pick apart a little bit to help support it when I put it down in the ball jar, so it also doesn't fall down inside any further than I want it to. And then I did the exact same thing with the other pick. And there you have it. How sweet are these? And you can change out the flowers for every season. Let me know what you think. DIY number 21. This is the final Hobby Lobby inspiration picture. I just thought it was so cute. It's like a little ornament, I think, but we're gonna make it like a bigger size. So I have some scrap fabric from the Dollar Tree from another project. I had some buffalo check ribbon. This is a little cutting board from the Dollar Tree. I'm taking some parchment paper. This is what I tend to use to paint on, but I'm gonna create patterns. So I have my pen and I'm just trying to get an idea of the size of these little pumpkins that I want to have on the top of my little cutting board. So just getting those, and this is just freehand. If you don't trust yourself to freehand, you can get a stencil, you can find a picture and trace a picture, whatever works for you. I just decided to do it freehand. Then I went ahead and, as you saw, I cut out my little patterns, and then I traced around my patterns on the back of my fabric, and I cut those out. Now I'm just using some satin Mod Podge to secure my little fabric pumpkins down. I secured it from the back, and then I did go over the top of it just to make sure that it was nice and sealed in there and it wasn't going to go anywhere. And I did that with all 3 of my little pumpkins, just like in the inspiration picture. Now I'm going to use my pencil again, and I'm starting in the middle with my words to try to get this as centered as possible. And I'm just going to draw in my pencil lines with my lettering, and then I'll come back over it with my paint marker. thought it was going to be a paint marker, you'll see what I actually end up using. So here's my Arteza paint marker. Now this cutting board has a little bit of a texture to it, and so it's kind of, for lack of a better term, bleeding a little bit. Remember, this is paint, right? So I was like, you know what, let me try a black Sharpie and see if that does a better job on this, because of that permanent marker. It's different than paint, right? So, and I did. I liked the way that that was giving me a nice sharp line. It wasn't quite as rich as far as the depth of that black. So if you don't mind a little bit of it looking like it's bleeding and you want that depth of the black, then the Arteza acrylic paint marker is going to do a good job for you. I opted to go with the Sharpie because I wanted really crisp lines. That was my goal. And that was also the reason I didn't try stenciling on this, because I knew with that texture on the board, I was just going to have bleeds everywhere. So there we are with all of the lettering, and now I'm just coming in with some hot glue. I do have a piece of parchment paper under this because the hot glue does not stick to the parchment paper. So if you're ever trying to do a project and you want to be able to keep it flat on a surface, to have it kind of butt up against the back of something, parchment paper is a really great thing to use. So just used my hot glue all the way around to attach my jute twine, and then I'm going to make my cute little bow with my buffalo check ribbon around the top there. And just going to make sure that I've got that bow all nice and lined up, tighten that up. And then I will trim off the ends at an angle, make them real cute. Trimmed off that one a little bit more. And now I'm going to make a hanger for it. So just going to cut, that was probably a 16-inch length that I doubled over and knotted. I'm going to flip it through and then flip it through itself. And got it. I love this, and I hope you do too.
Okay, everybody, that's it for today. Just a reminder that if you enjoyed the projects, please give me a big thumbs up. It really does help my channel to grow. Leave me a comment because that helps so much as well. And I love to hear your feedback on what you enjoyed about the projects. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell so that you get reminded every time I upload a new video. Until the next time, be well, be kind, make it a great day, and have a wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year. Take good care. Bye.